Okay, welcome back. So hopefully yesterday went smoothly and the assignment was pretty easily after you watched this video, after you watched my video. Um, Today is just one more lesson. This is lesson number 2. And again, we're going to use examples of World War One to help explain that the lesson is true. And then later this semester, we'll use that same lesson to apply to World War II and the Holocaust. So as per normal, let's see if I can share the screen here so that you can see the presentation. Again, this is the lesson of World War One and every other war as I see it. And if you remember, the lessons were these: the best way to learn about yourself and become a better person is to study war and other difficult situations. Today we'll talk about mindset and how that might help us get to an understanding of why we have war. Tomorrow is Leadership Matters and The Average Person Matters. I think we're doing those ones together. Later this week, there are consequences for every action and inaction you take. 6, war hurts everyone involved, sometimes in unseen ways. 7, the world should be better after a war. And finally, war is the worst solution, but it can be a solution. And so let's get right to lesson number 2, Mindset Matters. And again, we're going to use World War I as an example to prove that this is true. And later in the semester, we'll see if this is true for World War II. But you've studied World War I in world history courses, in American history courses, and other times throughout your life. So hopefully some of this is like a review, but maybe not. Maybe you'll learn some new things. So what are some things that led up to World War I? We'll talk about the Crimean War, and you probably have heard nothing about the Crimean War, but we'll learn about it. The Franco-Prussian War was helped at least to frame the mindset that we're going to talk about. There was this concept of militarism taking place all throughout Europe, and this need for alliances, and this rising sense of nationalism that we saw in European countries. So let's get right to it. Crimean War was Russia's effort to get what they called a warm water port. And so if you see the Black Sea here, oh, I got my little pointer. I keep forgetting I have that. Here's the Black Sea. Here was the extent of the Russian Empire. This country right now is called Ukraine. And so if you've been paying attention to the news over the last several years, you know that Russia, which is up here somewhere, has not only taken the Crimea Peninsula, so this is now officially held by the Russian government in 2017, but they've been fighting Ukraine as well a little bit. But back in the day, Russia, you can see the extent of the Russian Empire, included the Crimea Peninsula on the Black Sea. And the Russians wanted access through this part of the world out into the Mediterranean Sea, which is out here. This is called a warm water port, right? So it's open every day of the year, so they could put their warships and stuff here and have access to any place in the world. So the war was supposed to be a small war between Russia and what was known as the Ottoman Empire down here. This is what today is called Turkey. Constantinople is now called Istanbul. So this was supposed to be like a very quick, short war just between these two countries. But then all of these other countries started to get involved, France and Britain mainly. Both of these countries fought on the side of the Ottomans against Russia because of a couple of reasons. First of all, if you know France is on the Mediterranean Sea, and the last thing France wanted was a bunch of Russian warships on the Mediterranean Sea. If you know anything about Britain, they kind of took pride in the British Navy and having control over the seas and going wherever they wanted, whenever they wanted, and certainly didn't want to have a Russian Navy to contend with. Also, both of these countries were somewhat religious, and they wanted access to the Holy Lands, which was just south of Turkey over here, the Holy Lands, and they certainly didn't want to be cut off from the Holy Lands if Russia had control over this part of the world. Excuse me. Sorry about that. And then there was a small country called Sardinia. Sardinia is a small island off the coast of Italy, and they jumped on board too, not because of their hatred towards the Russians or because they love the Ottoman Empire, but they were thinking ahead. They were thinking if we help the French, especially during this war against Russia, then someday when Sardinia wants it, they will ask France for help, and um, and they get it a little bit later. In fact, Sardinia tries to unite all of the Italian states together under one country. And the one way that they thought they could get all of the Italian people to unite as one was to have some outside force invade them. There's nothing that brings people together than some outside threat, right? And so they somehow convinced France to invade the Italian states on the border of Italy and France today. And that was going all well, but what happened with France is that it became much more bloody than what they anticipated. And so they turned around and went back home. But Sardinia still had enough influence, and the people of Italy wanted to unite, that they did, in fact, unite Italy under the leaders of Sardinia, thanks to the help from France that France owed Sardinia as a result of the Crimean War. So all of these countries and others fought against Russia, and the Crimean War, which was supposed to be a quick war, easy war for Russia to gain access to the Mediterranean Sea, turned into be a great defeat for Russia. And so already, as a result of the Crimean War, which was, you can see the dates here, in the 1850s, because of the Crimean War, Russia did not like France and Britain and other people. And so that might play in some way when we talk about mindset. Did the Russians even like the French or the British? Did they consider them friends, or did they consider them enemies? Certainly the Crimean War is an example of maybe creating some enemies that didn't have to be. Also, there was the Franco-Prussian War between France here and these little German states. There was no country called Germany yet in the 1870s. But this was a way for a man named Otto von Bismarck, who ran Germany, who was kind of the military leader of Prussia at the time. He wanted to unite all these German states under one country as well. And so he created this war with France to get all the German states to unite with each other. Now, I'm not sure if this video is going to work here, but let's see. Let's play it and see what happens. It's only 2.5 minutes. Maybe there's no sound. You can see the colors changing, though. These are all the German states that are going to work together to fight France in what's called the Franco-Prussian War. And the result of the Franco-Prussian War is this new country called Germany. And you can already tell, I think, what is going to be the thoughts between the French and the Germans as a result of the Franco-Prussian War. I think there is one more. Well, so one thing that both of these wars accomplished was that there was this need for revenge. Revenge is a huge part of your mindset, right? If you're in this mindset of, if someone does me wrong, I got to hurt them back, then of course the next time something happens, you will probably do the wrong thing and try to hurt them back. And so you can see already between all these countries in Europe, this hatred that was rising between the Russians and the French, and the Russians and the British, and the Germans and the French. There was certainly no love lost between any of these countries. And so when we get into the conflict of 1914 that's going to cause World War I, this mindset of hatred, this mindset of revenge was already in existence, and maybe help them make decisions that were not the best ones to make at the time. Another thing that was going on in Europe all through this time was this rise of militarism. So militarism is this idea that the way you conveys strength is the building up of your militaries. And certainly every country, every major country in Europe, there were some countries who didn't build up their militaries, and maybe they should have, but most of the big countries, certainly the British, built up their navy. They had about a quarter of the world's population under British rule, and they owned about a quarter of the world's land. They had a huge British navy. The French had a lot of soldiers, but you'll see later on that they weren't probably well equipped. The Germans, though, they were the ones who really invested a lot of money into research, into how to kill people better in a war. They did a lot of research and development in military stuff. And so they developed some new weapons that we'll see in World War I, including the underwater boat, or what we call the U-boat, or what we call the submarine. That was developed by the Germans during this time. Another thing they created that's going to be important is this big gun. This was the biggest gun in the world, and they called it Big Bertha. And so they created this huge gun that we'll see. We'll get some action in World War I. In fact, I think I can tell you the story now, and maybe I'm hoping it's not later on. But when the Germans do invade, they will invade through Belgium. And poor Belgium, they had nothing. They were fighting with soldiers on horseback, and suddenly here come the Germans, and they launch these 1-ton shells out of Big Bertha that just destroy anything that the Belgians had. So these weapons were very effective for the Germans. Also, the idea of alliances were important. So I know I told you that the Russians and the British and the French didn't like each other as a result of the Crimean War, but because of their shared hatred of Germany and Austria, they were kind of forced to work together. And it shouldn't even be work together. They just were on the same side against Germany and Austria-Hungary. They were not really friends and working together, but they just happened to be fighting the same enemy. So if you look on this map, you'll see the three main countries that were part of what becomes known as the Triple Entente. ENTE is how you spell that. It's pronounced the Triple Entente, were the British, the French, and the Russians. And then here in the middle, you'll see what becomes known as the Central Powers. You'll see Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Turkey, or the Ottoman Empire. So these were the three Central Powers, and the three main Triple Entente was Russia, France, and Britain. Yes, so good. There was this concept of nationalism, and this video isn't going to work for you, but a rising call for nationalism. That the concept of nationalism simply means that your country is the best, that it's not really patriotism. Patriotism is your love of country, but you can love your country and not think that it's better than everybody else. And nationalism is just goes that one step further, that says the reason that Germany is a great country, for example, is because the German people are better. And so this rise of nationalism was occurring in all of these countries. So the British thought that, the French thought that, the Russians thought that, the Germans thought that. They all were thinking that there was something special about what they did that was better than everybody else. And so they weren't going to do what anyone else asked them to. Then there was this concept of, I've already talked about this hate and revenge that was building up. Everybody seemed to hate each other. Everybody wanted revenge on each other. And we're going to try to play this video. This comes from a movie called Joyeux Noël. It's a French movie about World War I. It's pretty good if you haven't seen it, or if you like foreign movies that have like subtitles. This would be one that you can watch. But these are the opening credits. It's the opening scenes of this movie, and you'll see these school children reciting poems that they were taught in school. Let's see if, and there's a German kid, there's a British kid, and I think there's a French kid. Let's see what they said. I hope you can hear it.
Enfant, regarde sur ces cartes ce point noir qu'il faut effacer. De tes petits doigts, tu l'écartes. En rouge, il vaut mieux le tracer. Plus tard, quoi que le sort te fasse, promets-moi bien d'aller là-bas, chercher les enfants de l'Alsace qui nous tournent leurs petits bras. Puissent, en notre chère France, les rameaux verts de l'espérance fleurir par toi, mon cher enfant. Grandis, grandis, la France attend. To rid the map of every trace of Germany and of the Hun, we must exterminate that race. We must not leave a single one. Heed not their children's cries. They're slain now, the woman too, or else someday again they'll rise. Which if they're dead, they cannot do. Ein Feind ist unserer und einer allein. Schon meißelt er Deutschlands Grabestein. Voller Hass ist sein Busen, voller Neid und voll Pein. Ein Feind ist unserer und einer allein. Nun hebt der Freveler die Meuchelnde an. Sein Name, du kennst ihn, ist England.
So there you go. If children were being taught these hateful things, just think about what the adults were thinking at the time in all of these countries. This concept of hate and revenge that everybody wanted. So all of these things going on, this rise of militarism, this rise of nationalism, this need for hate and revenge against each other, this is what the mindset was in almost every major European country leading up to World War I. And so that when the smallest thing occurred, because they wanted revenge, because they were full of hate, because they thought their country was the best, because they had the guns and the power to do something about it, they did something about it. And that's going to cause a whole bunch of problems. Now, think about if it was something different. If I'm just going to click on all of these here. Like, what's the mindset of the world now? Is our mindset like, hey, let's just calm down and talk things out and let's not try to kill anyone? Or is it like, oh, please do something, I'm just waiting for you to do something so I can kill you? And then certainly after 9/11 here in the United States, there was a mindset about, like, we had to do something. We have to do something about terrorism. And that was 16 years ago, and we're still fighting that war in Afghanistan that we started 30 days after 9/11. And that was because that's what the mindset we were in. Now, if our mindset was different, then perhaps we would have done different things. So hopefully you're seeing that mindset does matter. The mindset of the people, the mindset of the leaders, the mindset of the country, of the world. All of these things matter when especially talking about why a war has begun. So that's lesson number 2 of the lessons of war. You can do the assignment for today. Hopefully it'll make sense to you. Watch the other videos that I have listed here under Moodle. As always, if you have any questions, feel free to drop me an email or a text, and we will go from there. All right, thanks for watching, and we'll see you tomorrow.